Thank you. Well,
Are we?
Lost her.
thank you. Welcome to the Water Policy and Legislation Committee and special meeting of the Board of Directors for the West Basin Municipal Water District. It's March 17th. It is 1:01. I call this meeting to order. Do we have a quorum, Mr. General Manager? Or would you do the roll call?
Absolutely, Chair Gray. So we'll start with Director Deere,
Here.
Director Williams,
Here.
and Chair Gray.
Here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item. Thank you. Next item is public comment. Any public comment?
We have no public comments here in the room. I'll check on the online platform to recognize any member of the public who would like to be recognized by raising your hand on the platform. Seeing no hands raised on the platform at this time, I will understand that there are no public comments at this time. Back to you, Director Gray.
Thank you. Item 4, presentations. Are there any presentations?
We have no presentations today.
Thank you. Item 5, action calendar. 5A, please. Mr. General Manager, please introduce it.
Absolutely. And so we have Tammy Hurley-High, our Water Policy and Resources Analyst here to present a recommendation regarding a letter of support for Metropolitan Water District's Water Smart program. And so with that, I will hand it over to Tammy.
All right, thank you, Greg. Good afternoon, directors. This item is being brought to you today to request your consideration of submitting a support letter to the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. This would be for the Pure Water Southern California project, which is a joint program between the Metropolitan Water District and the Sanitation Districts of Los Angeles County. So recently, Metropolitan has submitted an application, a grant application to the Bureau of Reclamation in order to seek funding to help with the preparation of an updated feasibility study for the Pure Water project and to support the preliminary design for 2 pipeline reaches and a side stream centrate treatment process, which would be for nitrogen management of the project. So Metropolitan is required to produce a feasibility study in order to qualify for an upcoming large-scale recycled water program grant from Reclamation. So to support this effort, Metropolitan has requested a letter, support letter from West Basin Municipal Water District in order to show support for that program. So for this consideration, included in the board memo on attachment A is a draft support letter. And staff is recommending that the West Basin Board consider authorizing the general manager to submit a letter to Reclamation supporting this grant application for the program. The grant funds, if awarded, will allow Metropolitan, as I mentioned earlier, to prepare a feasibility study for preliminary designs. So as a bit of background, the Pure Water Southern California program is a major investment for new drought resilient water supplies. And this program includes a new conveyance system that would deliver water to groundwater basins, including West Coast Basin for indirect potable reuse in the future. So when this would be completed, the program would produce up to 150 million gallons a day, making it one of the largest recycled water projects in the world. The Metropolitan funding request would allow completion of a feasibility study, including project alternative analysis, economic analysis, and independent peer review. So this effort is to ensure the project eligibility in applying for the future under Reclamation's large-scale recycled water program funding. And Metropolitan grant proposal includes funding that would help in several ways that include evaluating alternate water supplies and reuse alternative strategies, assess options to address drought and climate change, to secure drought supplies and expedite design work for the project consideration. Proposed project is scheduled to be completed by October 2025 and would facilitate a full-scale project for construction by 2032. So regarding fiscal impacts, currently there are no fiscal impacts. In the future years, any rate increases that may be imposed by the Metropolitan Water District would certainly affect West Basin. However, Metropolitan will continue to be persistent in their search of new revenue sources, which include grants from the federal and state agencies, along with partnership to leverage the investments on Metropolitan system. I would be happy to address any questions you may have, and I can read the recommendation. So the recommendation is that the board consider authorizing the general manager to support a letter to Reclamation supporting this program, which will allow Metropolitan to prepare a feasibility study for preliminary designs.
We pass that on to the full board.
Thank you, Tammy. Any questions of anyone on any of the board members? All right, our three directors here, so we can pass it on. Thank you very much. The next item would be,
Director Williams had his hand up.
I'm sorry, Director Williams, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm not a member of this committee, but I would support this recommendation, and mainly because whatever that is being done by Metropolitan to improve the delivery of water for our region is consistent with our mission and vision. So I would be supportive of this. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for your comments. We'll move it with our recommendation from the committee. Right, next item is information. So, Mr. General Manager, could you go through that?
Absolutely. And so the first information item is concerning our elected leaders forum. And this will be an oral update provided by our Assistant General Manager, EJ Caldwell. EJ.
Yes, thank you very much, Greg. We just have a very brief update for you today. I want to say thank you very much to our administrative team in working with the board of directors. It sounds as though with working with the board's schedules that perhaps May 5th would be the preferred Friday for that elected leaders forum. West Basin staff is now in the process of reviewing some of the local events. Obviously, that Friday is a Cinco de Mayo celebration day, so we're looking to see if this would conflict with anything that's happening within our communities. But hopefully, we'll find that the majority of our elected officials are available. And if so, we would bring that date forward to the board and ultimately move forward with that. Again, the concept is to invite all of our elected leaders, both city as well as our school board officials, and then of course looking at potentially having staff from our legislative offices, from the Board of Supervisors, Assembly, Senate, and House of Representatives, and possibly the elected leaders themselves. So we're working now to construct the agenda for that. Obviously, it's fairly simple because we want to give a pretty broad, diverse array of subject matters, including all the agencies that help serve this, the West Basin service area. So once we wrap up the agenda or draft agenda, we'll then begin working on potential speakers that would join us on that day for presentations. Again, as just a reminder, this event is intended to include a tour of the Edward C. Little Water Recycling Facility. We would likely have two opportunities for the attendees to partake in the tour, one before the event begins, and then of course one after. That'll allow for those that come in the middle to possibly take that tour. And again, we would include a continental breakfast to begin the event, and then a hosted lunch for those attendees. So, Madam Chair, that's all I have, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Right here.
Director Williams has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the time of the proposed time.
So we'd be looking at a morning start time of about 9 a.m. and then work just after that lunch and then allow the tour. So it'd be kind of that mid half day event. So.
Yeah, based on the fact that most of the elected officials have multiple events because they're only here on the weekends. And we have, and how many, we have 17 cities and some of our officials like the folks with WRD, they have 43 cities or something like that. So there's always going to be conflict with meetings. I think we ought to pick a good date that satisfies most and go with it. Because we always have more than one meeting to go to. So, you just do what you can. That's all we can do. We try to meet everybody's calendar. We may as well meet with Don somewhere. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, if no other comment, Director Deere, any comment?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. And thanks for the report. Can you move to the next item, please?
Absolutely. And our Assistant General Manager will continue on the next item with our legislative update for February 2023.
Yes, thanks again, Greg. As you know, the legislative update is included in your board packet. It begins on packet page 8. However, due to the change in this committee date and time, we did actually email out the state legislative update. So you would have received it in your email today. Of course, we have it as a handout for those that are participating here in the building. And I believe, Hazel, were we able to post it?
It's in the chat.
Okay, excellent. So for those of the members of the public that are participating virtually, they'll also have access to it. So I want to begin this update by noting that next week on Monday, and of course, continuing into Tuesday, West Basin will be visiting Sacramento and meeting with West Basin's delegation and other state leaders there in the Capitol. The West Basin legislative team will also hand out 3 of our Legislator of the Year awards, which will be presented to Assembly Member Jesse Gabrielle, Assembly Member Reggie Jones Sawyer, and Assembly Member Laura Friedman. Meetings will take place on Monday, March 20th and continue into March 21st. As of right now, there are 15 meetings, but our schedule is constantly changing. So for those of the directors who are planning to attend, I would like to note that earlier today, we revised that itinerary and we did email that out. So Chairwoman Gray, you would have received an email earlier today from me, and we'll continue to revise that. What we're dealing with, I think, in Sacramento is somewhat unique. For those of you who haven't been in Sacramento in a short while, the Capitol right now, with the exception of the 2 chambers and some of the committee rooms, are actually closed due to construction. But in Sacramento, they actually constructed a new building for the purpose of this construction. And so all of the members are now in an office building outside of the Capitol. So we'll be actually attending our meetings there, but the Assembly members and members of the Senate will be crisscrossing back and forth to the Capitol and of course there. Not compounding it, but I would say as an added benefit of our visit in Sacramento on Monday and Tuesday is that they'll be celebrating Women's History Month. So each of the members of the California State Assembly and State Senate will be representing a woman from their individual Assembly and Senate districts. So the Capitol and of course the office buildings will be especially full with a lot of people celebrating. And so we'll be there and it'll be a great opportunity. In addition to giving out our Legislative of the Year awards, the group will be meeting newly elected representatives and their staff, providing an overview of West Basin and its programs, and highlighting reliability partnership efforts that are underway in the region. I do believe that we've handed out our brand new legislative briefing book to the members of the board that are attending the Sacramento trip. But I do have briefing books for those of you who are here today, and I'll be handing that out to you after this meeting. I'd like to make a special note that our Public Information and Education Department, you know, as we always do here at West Basin, we produce, I think, the finest information products and handouts for all of our events that we're out in the community. And our trips to Sacramento and Washington, D.C. Are very important to us as well. And it's worth noting that once you see that book, you'll notice that it looks amazing and it was produced in-house. We did go outside for printing, but everything else, and you'll see that it's a beautiful copy, was produced here by our public information and education team. Moving on to some other state issues. Last week, the budget subcommittees started to meet and discuss the governor's proposed January budget. One of the recurring themes is the legislature's concerns that state revenues will continue to dip even further than currently expected, which could impact the state's ability to invest in programs next year. On the policy side, the policy committees are starting to put together hearing dates for bills that have been referred to those committees. Some bills that have been introduced as spot bills or placeholder legislation on or near the February 17th bill introduction deadline can start to be amended as early as next week. So again, West Basin staff, with the assistance of Neomel Pappas and Associates, will be reviewing hundreds of bills, some of them 30 and 40 pages thick, and we'll be identifying some of those key issues. In other news, the governor did issue an executive order on March 10th to allow for additional capture of floodwaters to recharge and store groundwater throughout the state, although much of it will occur in the Central Valley. And this is, of course, related to the record-breaking precipitation that we've seen in December, January, February, and now March. They are experiencing high volumes of water flowing into our reservoirs. They are, many of them, being released into the canals and riverways in order to try to prevent as much flooding as possible, although the state of California will definitely be flooding. The concept is to put as much of that water as we can in our reservoirs, but then utilize some of our larger reservoirs, which are the groundwater. Obviously, you've heard about the extreme drought conditions over the last 20 years and really depleting the Central Valley groundwater storage. And so they're going to try to put as much water as they can. The new order relaxed some of the existing regulations and restrictions on permitting and used to allow water agencies and other users to divert flood water for the proposed or for the purpose of increasing groundwater recharge. Essentially, what the state is saying is if you can capture the water and put it in good use in storage and recharge areas, you do not need to apply for state permits to do so. And this is an excellent opportunity for us to expedite those programs and projects. And ultimately, the impact to West Basin will be offsets on the Central Valley project and, of course, the State Water Project if we can utilize that water. In a year like this one, we're having the record-breaking snowpack and rainfall. It's important that the state capture as much of the available supply as possible, lest it'll be unutilized. It is nice to see the state working with water users to take advantage of the available supplies in a very wet year. In another nod to how wet of a year it is, the Department of Water Resources also recently opened Oroville's dams, the main spillway, to ease some of the expected flood conditions that will occur later this spring and summer once all the snowpack begins to melt off. On this topic, the state has been hosting weekly updates about weather, runoff, and flood conditions. West Basin and its state lobbyists have been tracking these updates on a regular basis to understand current conditions and any proposed regulatory actions. Moving on to priority legislation, you can find more information in the handouts that we provided. We did provide a bill list. In the next month or two, and especially as the spot bills are amended into more substantive versions, West Basin staff will be identifying and bringing to this committee proposed bills for potential adoption of positions. There are a few bills that we wanted to get on your radars for now, but that will continue to be discussed throughout the legislative session. The first is Senate Bill 414 by Senator Ben Allen. This would prohibit a city or special district from issuing a rebate for the use of synthetic grass or artificial turf that contain certain chemicals, including PFAS. West Basin obviously is very invested in rebates as far as removing turf, but we do not provide any financial incentive for the replacement with artificial turf. So this legislation would not impact West Basin or our service area. We have already indicated to Aqua and others that we do not provide rebates for artificial turf, but that we do have a robust grass replacement programs that prioritize conversion to drought resilient landscapes. And this allows Aqua, one of our larger advocate societies and organizations, to really get out there and talk about how this impacts the state of California, but utilize West Basin Municipal Water District as an excellent example. There are also at least a couple of bills that have been introduced that would create a water bond for the November 2024 election. Obviously, in a wet year like this, sometimes you have a hard time getting a bill like that moving forward, or people coalescing around a water bond. But the beautiful thing about the legislature is that it is a 2-year session. So any bill that gets introduced this year, if it doesn't move forward or it doesn't meet the statutory constitutional deadlines, you can always pick those up next year. So if there is a wet, or if there is a dry summer and we enter into the winter next year with drier conditions, they can pick that up. But we'll continue to work on that. As it states in this month's report, West Basin's industry associations have developed a list of priorities that they would like to see funded in any bond measure, and NPA and West Basin staff are actively engaged in those conversations to make sure West Basin's priority funding areas would be represented. And this includes the action that the West Basin committee here just approved. Seeing funds for water recycling programs obviously help West Basin Municipal Water District when we apply, but also ensuring that Metropolitan Water District, who has just recently started to begin the process of applying for those grant funds through the leadership of Metropolitan Water District's previous chairwoman, that's a first for Metropolitan Water District to go out and seek those funding opportunities for grass replacement and water recycling. So West Basin obviously takes a great deal of interest in seeing those programs funded, even if West Basin Municipal Water District is not seeking to apply for grants at this time. Another major discussion item this year is non-functional turf. As we reported last month, there are currently 2 bills that have been proposed, AB 1572 and AB 1573, both by Assemblymember Friedman. And it's worth noting, obviously, that West Basin's delegation, when we go to Sacramento next week, we will be meeting with her. While Assembly Bill 1573 is still a spot format, Assembly Bill 1572 is in full form and has thus been heavily analyzed by the water community at large. West Basin is involved in 2 coalitions that are discussing Assembly Bill 1572. Aqua established a working group last month that has put together a list of amendments that they would like to see part of an opposed unless amended position. And Metropolitan Water District has convened a working group which met on Wednesday of this week. Now, Metropolitan was asked to be a sponsor of the bill by a couple of the NGO stakeholders. Staff's initial assessment of the non-functional turf bills that we appreciate the concept of them in going after NFT or non-functional turf as a way of saving water and making communities more resilient. On the other hand, there are definitely some concerns within the water industry about the initial draft, which is something for us to consider should we bring legislation to the committee for potential adoption of positions. Other topics of interest that may be brought to the board at future meetings include water rights, permitting, water supply, drought, and conservation. And I really want to highlight the issue of water rights, because that's something, as you see more and more flood water coming through the northern part of our state, they're really starting to look at how to best utilize that water. And of course, in droughts, making sure that water rights are protected. And of course, that water is utilized for beneficial use of everyone. A full list of bills is provided as one of the handouts today. As staff and NPA go through all of the bills, this list will be narrowed down to focus on the district's highest priorities. With that, I'm happy to move forward to page 10 of the agenda packet. While our state trip is next week, the federal trip to Washington, D.C. is also quickly approaching. Directors and staff will be headed east to our nation's capital the week of April 17th, where the district will meet with a number of our legislators and their staff, as well as staff from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation and the U.S. Army Corps. Meetings are currently being set up by West Basin's lobbyists, Van Scoyoc and Associates, and a full agenda will be provided in April to the directors who will be making the trip. Similar to the state trip, the group will be meeting with newly elected representatives and their staff, providing an overview of West Basin and its programs, highlighting regional reliability projects and opportunities, and presenting awards to 6 Legislator of the Year winners. In other news, President Biden released a partial budget request for fiscal year 2024, which was lauded by Democrats and criticized by Republicans. Of note is some considerable changes for the EPA's proposed budget, which would see a 19% increase from its current level, raising it from $10 billion to $12 billion to support environmental justice efforts, as well as implement new programs filtering down from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021. President Biden's request for EPA also includes a significant staffing boost with 2,300 new employees needed to implement new programs. Moving over to the Colorado River, in late February, Senators Dianne Feinstein and Alex Padilla published an op-ed of the San Diego Union Tribune urging state officials from Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming to work with California to preserve dwindling Colorado River supplies. As you know, the other 6 submitted a water reduction plan in January without consulting California, which was followed by California releasing its own plan independent of the other states. With no consensus yet reached, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation will have some decisions to make later this spring and summer, with any potential decisions likely to trigger legal action by one or more of the Colorado River states. I think that for those of you who had an opportunity to participate in West Basin's MWD caucus meeting, we did have the opportunity to have Bill Hazenkamp attend that meeting and provide a little bit of an overview of the current status of those negotiations. But I think what was of the highest value was kind of his take on the precipitation that we've seen here in California, as well as within the Colorado River Basin, providing additional time and opportunity to negotiate these settlements and actually reanalyze exactly how much water needs to be conserved on the Colorado River. Finally, there was some other news earlier this week from the EPA regarding PFAS. The agency is proposing a 4 parts per trillion as the maximum drinking water contaminant limit for PFOA and PFAS. It is also proposing a strategy to limit 4 additional types of PFAS as a mixture. If finalized, the proposed regulation will require public water systems to monitor for these chemicals. It will also require systems to modify the public and reduce PFAS contamination if levels exceed the proposed regulatory standards. PFAS is an issue that West Basin has tracked for several years and will continue to track and analyze in coordination with VSA and our state and federal industry advocacy organizations. Madam Chair, this concludes the state and federal reports, but I am happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, EJ. Are there any questions, Director Deere,
No, thank you.
Director Williams?
No, thank you.
Okay. I don't believe any other board members online. So thank you very much for that report. We'll move to the next item. C, please.
Absolutely, Chair Gray. And so that takes us to our Metropolitan Water District program updates. And we have Tammy to provide that update as well. Thank you, Tammy.
So this month's report focused primarily on the recent Metropolitan Board retreat. And it begins on page 14 of the committee packet. Included in this memo also is a link, it's a web link to a discussion guide that was developed by Metropolitan staff with input from member agencies. And they've titled that document A New Planning Era. So during the board visioning retreat, there were several in-depth discussions that were held among the directors regarding planning for future climate impacts and adaptation measures toward managing water supplies for the future. And this document summarizes the goals and consideration for proposed master planning. Among the goals is to align Metropolitan financial and water planning and to develop criteria for prioritizing investments for climate resilience. So this was a 2-day board workshop, which began with staff who provided updates on the water supply issues for both the State Water Project and the Colorado River Basin, highlighting the impacts of climate and significant changes to the water supply conditions. So discussions among the board continued with a meeting facilitator, which included a session for small groups to discuss major issues and opportunities in more detail on several subject matters, which included climate vulnerabilities resulting in decreasing water supply, risk assessment, managing operations under extreme drought and wet conditions, and vulnerabilities and findings identified under the Integrated Resources Plan. So at the conclusion of the retreat, a document was drafted summarizing those discussions with the intention to refine and structure the document so that it may be established as a framework and a master planning document. And they've titled that to be Developing a Climate Adaptation Master Plan for Water. That document presents goals and planning considerations for the proposed framework. And among the goals is to align metropolitan financial planning and water planning, and to develop criteria for prioritizing investments for climate resilience. So recently, the Board of Directors discussed this document at the recent subcommittee on long-term regional planning, and that meeting was held on February 28th. The board members provided additional input, and as a result of several discussions, that item will be brought back again for further review and discussion to continue further developing that document. So their next meeting will be Tuesday, March 28th at 10:30. So after that process, they plan on taking it to the Finance, Audit, Insurance, and Real Property Committee, and that would be for the Board of Directors consideration in the month of April. So that's pretty much it for the report of a lot of activities that had happened in February. And a summary of the board meeting actions are also included in this report. And next would be the board agenda look ahead. We're looking at March, April, and May. So at the time of this writing in March, you know, we did, we had what was expected, but we know now that the board did meet earlier this week. And one of the key items that were addressed was that the board took an action to remove the water shortage emergency condition for the state water project dependent areas. And they also terminated the emergency restrictions for those areas. So this action removes the emergency conservation mandate. However, Metropolitan is still encouraging people to continue the efforts in conserving water. And so this continued call for voluntary conservation efforts is because of the challenging supply conditions that Metropolitan and other agencies are facing from impacts along the Colorado River. So next month in April, the board is anticipated to receive a report on alternatives being considered by reclamation in the supplemental environmental impact statement for the Colorado River Basin operations. They're also expected to receive a report on the supply conditions along the Colorado River. And it's also important to note that Metropolitan is not planning to consider implementation of a water supply allocation plan, which we were hearing them discuss, you know, just a few weeks ago. So looking ahead in May, staff is planning to provide an update on direct potable reuse regulation, and then another review of the draft supplemental EIS for the Colorado River interim guidelines. And then lastly, for the water supply update, this is included at the end of the committee packet. It begins on page 23, the 2-page document with a lot of different graphs. So at that first page on the left side on the green shaded area for the state water project, as of February 28th, when this was printed, the Lake Oroville Reservoir was at 73% capacity. And the snow water content for the Sierra regions are very impressive, with 147% in the Northern Sierra and 224% in the Southern Sierra. For the Colorado River Basin, on the other side of the page, it shows Lake Powell to be at 22% capacity and Lake Mead at 29% capacity. And then on the second page, on the last page, it shows the storage reserves for the two major watersheds. And the state water project for the Northern Sierra snowpack has had significant increases due to several storm conditions, as you know, since December. And the box just below that showing the Oroville Reservoir storage, it showed 921,000 acre feet more now compared to what it was last year. And on the Colorado River Basin side, there is above normal snowpack with more than 15 inches that have been received so far in that region. So in summary, the storm systems that have occurred since December have significantly improved drought conditions and reservoirs across all of California. And so far, there have been 11 atmospheric rivers. And since December 1st, Oroville storage has increased approximately 180 feet. It gained about 1.7 million acre feet of water supplies. So as mentioned earlier, you heard from the earlier report, DWR is closely monitoring the lake levels with the weather forecast and mountain snow levels, and they've begun releasing water from their spillway. They will continue in this effort, and we will see how much more of the future storms we get. So that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tammy. Are there any questions, Director Deere?
No, thank you.
Director Williams?
Yes. Thank you. Now, I get a lot of questions concerning the stormwater capture that occurs here in San Gabriel Mountains. And the county for years did a great job of capturing that water. So how they're doing now with this storm? The atmospheric rivers, how many we've had so far?
I don't know how many we've had so far. So,
Yeah, they're up there pretty high.
but I would say they're doing an excellent job. You know, they've made significant investments over the last 10 years, and I don't know how many of you had the opportunity to reopen one of their dams up there, and the LA County Flood Control District and Mark Pistrella had really put on, I think, a pretty significant show talking about how much water they're going to conserve. And you know that as that water comes down through and you know, WRD, you know, the Water Replenishment District has not had to operate their water recycling program, I think, for the first couple of months of the year, because they were taking in all of that free storm water. And so being able to place that water in the ground and the Central Groundwater Basin, of course, I mentioned that because it impacts West Basin. You know, I think you're seeing the fruit of that labor. I think Greg could probably talk a little bit more about the San Gabriel, upper San Gabriel Basin and the opportunities there. But we are seeing a significant impact. And I know this conversation came up the other day in our committee here about stormwater. And I can't tell you, you know, the work that our team has done here at West Basin has had a tremendous impact. All of the grass that we're helping to replace and remove with native landscaping, that's allowing for that rainwater to stay on the property, because you want to eliminate as best you can your wet and your dry weather runoff. And so any opportunity that you can have to do that, so you don't see all that water running down the street, that is where you get that benefit. So all those cisterns that you're seeing being placed in parks, and all of the native landscape that you're seeing in our larger landscaped areas, in the PV area, Malibu area, but also your schools and your cities, all of that helps maintain and keep that water from running off the properties. And the way we know that we've been successful in doing that is that we're actually seeing a significant decrease in our water demand in December, January, February, and now in March. People are not watering their lawns, and they're maintaining that green look that people tend to enjoy. And if you have a chance to drive through the West Basin service area, no matter what city it is, you're going to see a lot of greenery. It's because of all of these storms and actually maintaining that. You know, I give another shout out to Gus Meza and, of course, our board of directors. You know, we were able to get those rain barrels out prior to the rainy season. That's a first for West Basin. We usually do that into the spring as people start to garden. So ultimately, we had 1,500 rain barrels that have continued to be filled up every single storm that comes in. And if you add that to all of the rain barrels that we've done over the past years, you're talking in the thousands and thousands of rain barrels. So being able to utilize stormwater is something near and dear to West Basin. I think we do a great job of it. But the LA County Flood Control District obviously leads that effort for all of LA County. But you can see all of these investments really starting to work.
Some of my constituents have wondered if we receive all this free water, or the water rates going down after the storms.
So as you are going through this process now with your budget, unfortunately, the management of water, actually, most of it is somewhat fixed, especially if you look at where your water is coming from, the State Water Project and the Colorado River. You're paying for all of those investments all through the system, and we're kind of at the end of the system. So you need to help pay for all of that to get it here. And then I'll also point out, and this is the toughest piece of it, and I wish he would have said it while the microphones were on, but after the Met Caucus, Dimitri Polizos, who I think is, as far as water knowledge and management, he's a go-to person for me. He pointed out something that should be fairly obvious, but we don't think about, is that the cost of managing water is much more expensive in a wet year than it is a dry year. A lot of work goes into capturing that, treating it, obviously safely discharging it. So a lot goes into these rainy seasons, and you see that in parts of not just the state of California, country, and world, where you have a large precipitation, but managing that is crucial, but it's expensive. So
The other thing, I'm just going to say this and I'll shut up and go home. The rain barrel system is wonderful. It's great. And when the rains come, they come. And at the beginning of the rainy season, your barrel fills up. And you don't have your room after that. So all the subsequent storms, the water just flows over the top of the rain barrel, because where you were using your rainwater was the water your plants in your planters. Well, your planters are now full too. So that's why I encourage people to get more than one rain barrel. And some of my constituents, the ones who live in Rancho Palos Verdes, and they have these large properties, and the floor or the roof plan of their homes is really big. So they have, in addition to the rain barrels, they have the cisterns as well. Rains like this, they have more water than they can handle too. So, but the key thing is though, I try to get folks to take more than one rain barrel, because you need storage for the time when we don't get rain. But this is wonderful, and still they don't understand why they have to pay for water when water's free. But that doesn't put it in the pipe. All right, well, thank you.
Let's go.
Hello? Hi. Yes, Director Williams, you finished your comments?
Yes, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Just one question. When we do our rain barrel giveaway, are residents allowed to get more than one rain barrel, or just one per person?
they're eligible to receive 2 per address.
Water bill.
2 per address. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. I think that brings us to, we completed that section of the agenda. So I think we're at closed session. Is there any closed session?
There are no closed session items today.
Okay. Item 8, Director's comment. Director Deere.
Just want to note that this meeting took less than an hour, and I congratulate you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Director Williams.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Future agenda items on any items from the board. And I'd like to say just thank you to the general manager and staff for the reports this morning. Very appreciative in your reporting out this morning. And so with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, board members and staff and the public. Thank you again. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Gray. Thank you, committee.
Bye-bye.
Do you two like briefing books?
Yes, please.